Alright everyone, Cowboy Trades here, back with another update. So in this video I wanted to talk to you about this chart that I've got on my screen. Now this is a chart that helped us call for the stock market and the crypto markets to break down into new lows over in October. Veterans of the channel definitely remember this one. It is the iShares TIP ETF. So let's talk about it now. First of all, a quick fundamental lesson. A TIP ETF is a treasury ETF which holds bonds that are protected against inflation. Hence the name TIPS. It just means Treasury Inflationary Protected Securities. Now, there are many TIP ETFs, but we're just going to be looking at the iShares TIP ETF. Why are we going to be looking at this one and not any other one? Well, simply this is the largest TIP ETF in the world. They hold almost 25 billion worth of assets under management. So what I really wanted to say in this video is, with inflation metrics like sticky CPI and core CPI pushing up to new highs, and then you pair this with financial conditions moving from very, very accommodative territory, they're starting to get more restrictive at the moment. That happens when we get a higher interest rate, stronger dollar, stronger government bonds, and as you can see, this basically causes liquidity conditions to deplete over time. So these are the type of things that we basically need to see for our SPX fractal to break down into the new lows, which it's been predicting for the past 6 months or so since we've been looking at this chart. And if the TIP ETF isn't safe from breaking down into new lows, well then the S&P 500 definitely isn't safe for breaking down into new lows. So let's get onto the TA. What does the iShares TIP ETF currently say about the next move for the crypto and the equity market? So what's very interesting about the iShares TIP ETF is because it's inflationary protected, it often choreographs the moves that happen before the S&P 500. So if I remove this, we're simply looking at the iShares TIP ETF, so you can see it topped out here. Lows, tops, lows, tops, lows, and tops. Let's now blam over the S&P 500 chart. So this is the SPX. As you can see, SPX is in blue, and the iShares TIP ETF is these obviously green and red Japanese candlesticks. So once again, let's look at the time periods between what happens in here, because you'll see some divergences happen in the S&P 500 from the iShares TIP ETF, but the iShares TIP ETF is the SPX's daddy, so it always smacks it back into place when it's disobedient. So let's see what's happening over here. iShares TIP ETF topped out 10th of November 2021. How long did it take for the S&P 500 to play catch up? Well, 56 days. iShares TIP ETF topped out 56 days later. When the iShares TIP ETF broke down, the SPX snapped back from its little mini divergence there. Let's see what happened from there. iShares TIP ETF came down, made new lows before a bounce on the 10th of February. How long did it take for the S&P 500 for the S&P 500 to play catch up? 26 to 30 days approximately. You're going to see this 30 days. You're going to hear me say that quite a few times. Let's look at what happened. So iShares TIP ETF over here topped out on the 8th of March. How long did it take for the S&P 500 to play catch up? 22 days. What about the next time? So we came down, iShares TIP ETF made macro lows 14th of June. It took about 2 or 3 days for the S&P 500 to play catch up. Now, this is where it gets very interesting. So this is what I was talking about at the start of the video. If you have been watching me for a while, you know that we've been looking at things like the Nasdaq futures, the QQQs, and how the TIP ETF correlates or choreographs these lows before the S&P 500. So what you can see is, yeah, they basically both made lows at the same time. You can see TIP ETF made new lows in June. This is where, you know, Bitcoin bottomed at quote unquote 17,600. That's where the bottom was. Over here on the S&P 500, this is where the S&P was right here in June, you know, 3,600 before breaking down into new lows in October, 3,500-ish. So when we come over to this chart, what you can see is what we were predicting based on looking at the history of the TIP ETF is that the TIP ETF was breaking down on the 31st of August. We made new lows on the 1st. We opened in new lows and we proceeded to break down. How long did it take the S&P 500 to play catch up? Once again, like I said, 29 days, 29, 30 days. We're not nitpicking between, you know, a 24-hour period. But you can see, you know, this 29, 30 day period seems to pop up quite a lot. And at this moment in time, if we come back over to the SPX, you can see the markets are moving pretty similarly. Over on the S&P 500 here, you can see we are in a pretty big bear flag right now. I do think the inflation numbers that come out on Thursday might push us to the downside of this. Probably will if we do get that hotter than expected inflation. Like I have been predicting, if you do want to learn more about that, I talked about this in this video over here, pivotal week for Bitcoin and equity markets. We talked about, you know, all of that boring economic data, which really actually leads the markets more than trend lines. So looking at this, you've got a bear flag over on the S&P 500. On the TIP ETF right now, if we hide the SPX for a second, you can see, you know, it's been bear flag after bear flag after bear flag, and the S&P 500 just plays catch up a little bit later. But right now, iShares TIP ETF is really not looking too good. You can see we've kind of just completed a reversion to the mean on the daily time frame. We actually came up to it yesterday. We touched the EMA ribbons, and if we come down to the lower time frames, you can really see, you know, we're making lower lows and lower highs, and it's, well, we're still holding the lows from the 30th of September actually, but we're still making lower highs, and we are obviously in this bearish pattern right now. Once again, what do I think is going to push this iShares TIP ETF to the downside? I think it's going to be these inflation numbers that are coming out on Thursday. So once again, like I said, you know, there is a little bit of a delay with the S&P 500 chart. Once again, S&P 500 plays catch up after we have these big divergences, like we can see over here on the daily time frame. The S&P 500, here's its lows in June, right? And it was the same for Bitcoin, 17,600. We broke beneath these lows, but right now you can see the S&P 500 is actually trading above its June. It's trading above its June lows, and the same, or not the same with Bitcoin rather. But if we do come over to the iShares TIP ETF, you can see this is once again where we're seeing a divergence. This is the lows over in June, and if we're looking at the S&P 500 chart, you know, the S&P 500 made new lows and then it bounced back above these lows. But the iShares TIP ETF is saying once again, what are you doing, S&P 500? You listen to me. When I break to the downside, you are going to be playing catch up. So once again, this is going to be another one of these videos that we probably look back on like we look back on the QQQ videos, where really the iShares TIP ETF, it bottoms and tops, it choreographs these troughs and peaks in the market before the S&P 500. And the S&P 500 all the time just plays catch up. Once again, you can see over here, the iShares TIP ETF, once it made its lows over on the 13th of June, it really didn't have that much of a big rally. You know, it barely poked its head above the EMA ribbons, and then it just got shot all the way back down to the downside. The S&P 500, on the other hand, you know, it broke its EMA ribbons and it flipped bullish before, you know, obviously breaking back down. We were obviously still making lower lows, lower highs. S&P 500 gets more euphoric, and once again, when we come over to the iShares TIP ETF, this is sometimes where the iShares TIP ETF says, you know, I don't know what you're doing, S&P 500. We line up the lows here. S&P 500 goes on a massive rally. TIP ETF breaks down into new lows, and it says, you know what, you are going to be playing catch up with me. So I think the same thing is coming right around the corner. Once again, these things can be delayed by a few weeks, you know, maybe even a month. So I'll keep you up to date on these. Just a quick update for this one. So yeah, I know these videos aren't normally going to be as fun as looking at, you know, your Bitcoin and your altcoin videos, but nonetheless, you know, these charts are really what rule the markets. And while once again, it's not as fun as looking at what's happening in Bitcoin and altcoins, we were able to tell, and we were able to forecast the breakdowns in Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency markets, because of these metrics like the iShares TIP ETF. So I'll keep you up to date. It's all I've got for you for this episode, Cowboys. Make sure you smash that like button if you like the content, leave a comment, share it with your friends. Make sure to come and join the Discord. Socials are all in the about section. Cowboy out. Peace.